Welcome to Making Conversations, a podcast from makers Gemma Millen and Robin Galway.
Today we are making conversations with Nicola Gates of Olla Nua, who is based in North Belfast, Northern Ireland. We are approaching the end of our first series of Maker Conversations, as this episode is episode 4 of 5 and features designer-maker Nicola Gates of Olla Nua. Nicola and her beautiful studio is based in North Belfast, where she specialises in woven textiles, and it's where Robin and I recorded this fantastic episode. We love every second of this episode and know that you will too, so let's get listening to Nicola Gates of Olla Nua. We are with Nicola Gates of Olla Nua in her beautiful studio in Belfast today. Hello.
Hi.
Okay, so this is a beautiful studio. You have a lot of natural light in here, which is really fantastic. And a lot of custom made stuff. This is all custom made, is it? The benches. It seems very purpose built, the studio space.
Yeah, it's north facing, so it's got nice soft light. I've actually got a view of Cave Hill. So obviously we're in North Belfast. You can see it when you stand up. So yeah, it's a lovely studio, and yeah, I got my bench made locally, so it's just been made for the right height, and
it's perfect. Yeah, so much storage, and it's on caster wheels, and you seem to have everything organised so perfectly in the studio. It's such a pleasure to look at. And then we're sitting kind of in a bit of a corner, but behind us we've got the looms. They are dominant in the studio space.
Well, just to mention about the workshop, just to give people an idea of who I'm with and that. So we're in what we loosely call the Little American Congress, which is a loose collective of makers and designers based in and around North Belfast. So it was really started up by Olla and Martin of Oscar and Oscar, who are architects who work from the building, and they took on a few other makers. I think maybe 9 of us in total, who have taken up the different rooms in the building. So it's a nice little mix of, there's woodworker, print, architecture, as I mentioned. There's a girl who makes Shifra Caherty, who makes bags from recycled materials. We've got lots of variety, so it's really nice.
But coming up here, it's so unexpected.
It's so
really lovely,
refined as well. Like, it's really beautiful and clean, and just so well organised.
You got it on a good day, not always like this.
Instagram ready. But could you tell us a wee bit about yourself and how you basically started into textiles and your education?
Okay, well, I did actually study weaving at college. Not that you would need to really, but I kind of ended up in doing a textile degree, not really having planned it too much, but I was always sort of a bit of jack of all trades, master of none at school. So there was lots of different things I was interested in. I always found it very hard to choose one thing, and I would really wreck my head trying to make decisions. I was very bad at making decisions when I was young. Just really would take a long time over trying to decide what course to do, and I even applied for things like landscape architecture, biology degree, which I think I got places in all of those. But somehow I kept coming back to art and textiles, and I think it was because it was just what I was used to doing from a very young age. My mum would have taught me how to sew and knit from I was really able to hold a pair of knitting needles. So she would have helped me to make my first little elasticated skirt when I was probably about maybe 5 or 6 or something like that. Or she would have helped me on a wee Singer sewing machine that my aunt had given me. So I think it was just sort of instilled in me, and she also collects a lot of fabric, and had an attic full of fabric at home at my parents' house. So she would have really just given me that love of textiles and texture and colour, and from a very young age. So I think that's why I really got in. Kept going back to it, and then so I ended up doing a foundation course in Limavady, which gives you a taster of everything. Ended up after that still not knowing if I wanted to continue with art, but eventually deciding to do a textile degree. Got refused. I didn't get into the National College of Art and Design initially when I applied, which made me realise actually I really wanted to go there.
Oh yeah.
So then they put me on the waiting list, and I did get in the end. I think whoever had got in originally didn't take up the course, so I got in and ended up living in Dublin, doing the degree course there for 3 years.
Wow.
Which give you a taster of weave, embroidery and print.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no idea I wanted to do weaving at all. Had never done it. Had no interest in it and thought it was maybe a bit old-fashioned and fuddy-duddy and stuck in the past. At that time, that was back in 2002 to 2005. But I had a really nice weaving tutor, Rachel, who just started teaching at NCD at that time, and she, rather than explaining the techniques of weaving from the start, she just got us, she had lots of different looms set up, and she just got us to sit down and do like a round robin, try out the different patterns or different colours, whatever we wanted to weave into the warps. And I just found really intuitively, just really enjoyed how satisfactory it was to create your own fabric like that.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, brilliant. And so then going down to Dublin, that must have been a really big decision as well. I mean, it was the choice to go to NCAG because they were the only ones that had that type of course, and that's why you chose to go there? Or
Not really, because to be honest, I hadn't really researched exactly what different textile courses would involve. Maybe I was quite naive at that age. Probably should have, but no, I think I had applied to Scotland as well and to Edinburgh, and I'd got in there, and it probably would have been great, but my now husband, who was then boyfriend, was going to Queen's, and I think without admitting it in my head, maybe that was partially why I didn't want to leave the country. So, but I didn't want to go to Belfast. I had no connections in Belfast at that time, and although I live here now, but I just wanted to go somewhere a little bit further from home, and Dublin actually at that time kind of seemed like almost although it's Ireland, but almost seemed like a foreign place because it wasn't somewhere that I had been much. I grew up in the countryside in Fermanagh, so it just wasn't a city person, and it seemed like such a big city compared to the likes of Belfast or Derry, and so it seemed foreign enough but also local enough to kind of be a balance between the two.
A little bit of home then still instilled in it.
The 3-hour bus journey is still quite a chore.
Did you not stay down there?
Oh, I did.
Oh, sorry. Oh no.
Oh yes,
just for travelling.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know the way when people go to university in Belfast, if you live in Northern Ireland, quite often they'll go home every weekend with their washing. I didn't do that.
Okay. Okay. So what did you speak about the influence that your mum had? What did she have? Did she work in the textile industry at all, or what connection did she have?
Was actually, she loosely did work in the textile industry for a long time before I was born. She worked, I think, more in admin with for Desmond's factory, which was in Irvinstown, near where I'm from, near Kesh. And they would produce a lot of leisure wear clothing, I think, for the likes of Dunn Stores. They closed down years ago. I vaguely remember the factory still being there, and there used to be a factory shop where she would get the remnants of the material, which is how we had so much fabric. So she worked there for a few years, but then she gave up her work to look after children as soon as I think my brothers were born, probably. So she had a wee bit of background in that, but no, she always talked about wanting to, she might not like me saying this now, she always wanted to set up a knitwear business. And she had a knitting machine, and she was she'd done beautiful samples that she'd showed me and everything, and when we were young she would have done quite a lot of knitting, but it's so difficult, as I'll talk about setting up your own business, so it just didn't quite happen for her. She didn't have the opportunity really, so I think that kind of ambition came through, but
definitely. Okay.
And so then in university, what was the sort of first thing that you kind of made? Like, what was the aesthetics of the first lot of work you kind of
Do you mean in weaving or textiles in general?
In textiles in general, to then specify maybe in weaving. Was it weaving throughout after you did, the initial sort of sampler? Were you kind of like hooked on weaving and that's what you continued with, or was it a bit of everything with a similar aesthetic?
It's such a long time ago that, gosh, you're bringing me back now. I have to take a refresher and go through the portfolio, which has been sitting in the corner now for a long time. But, I think I find quite a lot of the work in textiles quite difficult, actually. I find that if we didn't have a particular end use for a project or a product, I would find it really difficult just to come up with ideas. So when I got into weaving, I would always have started to think about the end product, and what the purpose would be for the item, so for the fabric. So my final year project, which is the one I would remember best because I think it was the best resolved project, really before that I don't think I had really any work that would be very memorable to me, so that's why I maybe find it hard to to answer that, but my final project was aimed at taking the textile right through from source to final product, so really thinking about the process, but also having fabrics, cloth that could be used for a particular purpose. So I spun a lot of the yarns from fleece that I'd sourced to give texture to the woven item. So I would weave that textural yarn then into the weft of the warp, so it would just add a bit of dimension to the product that was going right from source through to final product, and showing, actually communicating the process as well, which I hadn't really seen done before, and I'm sure other people had done something similar, but I had shown a wee video with my project showing the spinning and the carding of the yarn, of the wool, so I really just like that idea of connecting the product from the raw natural source, the sheep's wool.
Okay. I'm not familiar with the structure of the courses that are down there. Is it very driven towards producing product, or was that just your own, you decided that you were more interested in producing product?
To be honest, I'm sure it has changed quite a bit from when I was there. As I said, it was 2005 I graduated, so I'm sure it probably is quite different now. I think it was quite loose the way they approached it when I was at NCD. I think the course is probably structured differently now. It was quite a long time ago, but it's such a, I suppose many art fields are, but textiles is such a diverse field. You know, you could be designing cloth for functional products, or you could be designing an art sculptural piece, and they were open to all of that, I think, really. But each project would have been different with a different brief. So the tutor would have set brief, which would have been either product orientated, or quite often it might have been just sampling fabrics for fashion, whether it was in print or weave or embroidery, or interiors. So usually it was quite a distinct brief, and that would have specified whether it was, but generally it was more geared towards functional textiles rather than art, which suited me better, I think, actually, anyway.
Brilliant.
Yeah, great. And so after graduation then, what happened? What was the plan?
Oh, well, I was quite naive. I had got, actually, I'd won a competition, or received a prize from a competition that I entered in my final year, which was brilliant. It was through the RSA in London, the Royal Society of Art, the Royal Society of Arts, which has a longer title. I'll not go into. I can't remember the exact title of the organisation, but the RSA. I entered their design directions competition, and they had categories for lots of different art fields. I entered the textiles and the woven one, and had to go over for an interview in London, and you had to specify whether you wanted to apply for a bursary for travel, which was, I think, £1,500, I think, or an internship with John Lewis in their interior textile department, which obviously would have been amazing, but I just couldn't think about work or anything at that stage. I just wanted to travel and have fun, and as long as I had a bit of money to keep myself going, I didn't mind. So I chose the travel money, and I went to South America then for 5 months. Well, I worked for another 6 months, and locally back home, went back home to live with my parents for a while, and worked in a curtain fabric shop for 6 months to add a wee bit to that money. So I had enough to go travelling then. Started off travelling with a friend and her friend from university, who were going travelling for different reasons than me, but we wanted to go to the same place. We wanted to go to South America. So I used that opportunity that they were going. I went with them. But as I said, my purpose was very different. I wanted to make sure I used that money because I'd been awarded it. I wanted to make sure I used it to do a bit of research on the textiles. So mainly in Peru and Bolivia, I suppose, were the most interesting areas. I travelled through a little bit of Peru, quite a bit of Bolivia for a good, I think maybe 2 months almost out of that, where I spent a bit of time living with the family and learning some Spanish for a week or two. And then went down through Chile and across to Argentina. Not quite, I think, down far at the very bottom of Chile, but we went across the border, I think, in Patagonia. So did all that travelling by bus, which was an amazing experience, and a good bit of it on my own, but meeting up with, lots of other travellers along the way, which was amazing. It was just really amazing opportunity, and I think the memories will last forever. I haven't written anything down. I always intended to, but I've got lots of photographs, but just seeing the men and women there weaving as part of daily life, really. And, you might see a woman making a warp up with 2 sticks on the top of on a mountainside in the city.
Wow.
You know, using very basic equipment, but the work that they were able to produce is so beautiful and so complicated that we would use, you think, you know, you had to have a really complicated piece of equipment to make, but they would do it all by hand and eye and memory. I don't think they wrote anything down. It was just skills that were passed down from generation to generation. And even there was an island that we went to visit in Bolivia. I can't remember the name of it right now. Might have been Isla del Sol, but sorry, the names escape me. But it had a tradition of the men would knit, and it was often the young boys, and you would see them actually walking home from school, knitting as they were walking, and they would knit their little hats with the ears, the long ears, over, you know, the ear covers, and they would knit these amazingly intricate patterns just as they were walking home from school. So it just goes to show you how much it was passed down through families.
Yeah, that's incredible.
So when I got back from travelling, then I think reality hit home. Had a bit of time where I didn't know what to do. I was back home in Fermanagh. Eventually then, after another 6 months or so, doing a bit of work at home in a country park in a heritage job, I moved back to Dublin and worked for the Office of Public Works for I think 6 months to a year, in retail as well. But the Office of Public Works then got me into a bit of tour guiding at Dublin Castle and kind of introduced me to the career of heritage and museums and that kind of thing. So I and at Castle Town House in Kildare, I worked there as a tour guide for a summer. So then when I got back to the north, I decided eventually to move back to Belfast, be closer to my partner and my husband. So I ended up doing a skills course in collections management with museums, so at a local museum in County Fermanagh, and then eventually got a job as a temporary assistant curator at Mid Antrim Museum in Ballymena, which was a really great experience. And I loved working with collections, and it gave me something that could give me a reasonable income, but still related to, I could bring in my knowledge about textiles and art and design. So it was a nice opportunity. I really enjoyed designing the exhibitions and that side of it. But I did kind of kept feeling like I really wanted to try out my own business, or, you know, keep going with my own ideas and produce products rather than just always be putting other people's work on display. I wanted to get back into making my own work. So when the contract came to an end, I used that opportunity then to develop my own work.
Brilliant. And so you weren't making during that period at all, or were you?
I was trying to make a little bit. I kind of thought I would be able to do that part-time. So I started off doing actually felt making, because that was quite easy. I didn't need much equipment for that, something you could do on your kitchen table. But it's a lot of hard work and very difficult to sell the work at a price that you need to make the money back on it. But I taught a few classes in the felt making over the years, so that kind of kept something textiles going in my head. And the weaving, I had purchased a loom probably while I was still working at the museum, I think, but I hadn't really had a lot of time to get going on it. So I think with something like weaving especially, great if you can do it part-time, but for me I had a year where I was just thinking about the designs and testing out the equipment and getting to know the equipment, because in college we didn't actually have much time to do the technical setup. We got a little bit of help from a technician to set up the looms, but you really, a lot of your time is spent designing and in theory and writing up your thesis, that kind of thing. So I felt like I was really learning almost from scratch how to use this loom that I'd bought secondhand, and how to actually get into the routine of designing fabric again. So I kept it going, but it wasn't really until I had the opportunity to use all my time to do that it really got started.
Brilliant. So the loom that you got then, it's in the studio now, could you describe the loom itself, what type of loom it is?
Yeah, sure. I think a lot of people really like, when they come into the studio, they always comment on the loom that it's a lovely piece of equipment, and it is, because it's completely almost wood with metal bolts here and there. Always say to people it's a little bit like IKEA before IKEA existed, but it's Swedish, so it's Glamakra loom. Glamakra is the Swedish brand that produced the loom, and I think they still make them. So it's a really big floor, what's called a floor loom. So it sits on the floor. It's about, well, it can weave up to 1.5 meters wide, and it's about the same depth, maybe 2 meters deep, and probably about 2 meters high, all in all. So it takes up quite a lot of space, which is why I don't work from home. And yeah, it's all string and wood, not much metal, so it's very nice to use. It's not too noisy. Some of the more industrial, or some of the looms that would be used maybe in Scotland would be quite a lot of metal and very noisy, so this one's quite nice to use. It's what was designed for a domestic loom, really, for people to use in their own homes to weave rag rugs and their home textiles back in the sort of 50s, whenever people were doing that. A lot more maybe than they are today.
And so can you describe the process then of making, like obviously after you've got your design and everything, setting up the loom and how that works?
Yeah, sure. So it's quite a lengthy process weaving, but that's what I really like about it, because you're seeing it right through from scratch. So once I've got my design drawn up, my weaving draft drawn up, and I've decided on the yarns and the colours I'm going to use, I wind a warp on my warping board. My warping board's just very simple pegs on a board hung on the wall, where you can get ones that swing around as well. But either way, you just the warp is wound onto the warping mill or the warping board as long as I need it. So it might be anything from 3 to 19 or 20 meters. And then the warp is wound onto the loom under tension. So there's a beam at the back that holds the warp. That's wound under tension onto the loom. So I'd have to weight it down. I do it all myself. So have a little bit of a technique where I can do that without other hands helping me. It just gives me more flexibility. So I use weights to weight the warp as it's wound onto the loom. And then it's just a matter of getting the technical setup done on the loom. So it's the ends are threaded through heddles that are carried on shafts, and the shafts are then connected to lambs and foot pedals with lots of pieces of string. So it's quite a complicated setup for that loom, actually. It's a little bit tricky. There are lots of looms that are more modern looms that have different advanced things that you can do to make the setup a little bit easier. But looms are very expensive, so I do enjoy using that one, and I make the most of it.
So you, with your travelling experience as well, you saw people weaving very basically, and this is not it's not a digital loom or anything. It's all done by hand.
No, yeah, that's one thing that's quite important to me. Although I'm not saying I would never use computer programs to design, but I just don't happen to have the program. It costs a couple of £100, which I'm sure I could get if I wanted to. But I find that when you learn at college, we learned how to do the draft on paper, and it's quite a technical process. You use graph paper and you work out a draft that shows you the threading, the tie up for the treadles, and then the weaving pattern for the weft that's thrown in to make the actual fabric. So I think to design a successful cloth, you need to be able to understand how to do that by hand anyway, and you always learn that at the start. And I think that if I was doing it on the computer, I wouldn't have that full understanding of how the structure of the cloth worked, whereas I really like to have that kind of understanding, and it can take quite a long time to design the draft. And at some stage I probably will get the computer program just to speed things up a little bit, but I really like that process of noting by hand the technical setup of the loom.
Okay. And so obviously the loom is so huge. Did that really establish the need for a studio space? You weren't going to try and do this at home?
Yeah, well, it started off, actually, my dad was very good and built me a shed, especially for my loom, which was great, got me started. It just wasn't working out quite so well because our climate is so damp. I think you really need a building. If you're using a lot of wood and cloth and things, you need a building that's heated. So it wasn't really ideal for long term. And then obviously I wanted to moving away from Fermanagh as well. And so yeah, because of the size of it, it's not. If you live in the country and you have lots of space, yeah, hopefully eventually we will be able to. It would be great to be able to work from home, just from the perspective of having more time to be able to work in the evenings and that kind of thing. But here at the minute, in Hopefield Avenue, I'm really happy with being around other people. It's nice when you work alone, especially. It's nice to be able to see other people coming and going. So yeah, if you have lots of space, you could easily work from home, but it's nice to have the luxury of a studio space.
Brilliant. And so then you were setting up your business for products. that was how many years ago now?
Well, I launched the business at a fair in Castle Ward late 2015.
Okay.
And I'd spent 2015. My husband had taken a job. His first job was in County Fermanagh. So I had a bit of an opportunity there to use the time to think about the business and design the first products, which were cushions.
Okay.
And fabrics for cushion covers, and then I made them up into cushions. So I launched with that late 2015, just wanting to see how they went. And yeah, I took it from there. I suppose started selling properly then that early 2016. So I still feel like I'm quite new to this really, because I took some maternity time off then in 2018. So I still feel like I'm learning all the time, and still lots of challenges.
Yeah. Well, you've expanded your ranges as well from cushions. You're now producing a multitude of different pieces. Is that was that a conscious decision from the start, that you had a list of products that you wanted to develop?
Yeah, well, I suppose I started with cushions because I was always drawn to interiors, but it's quite difficult to sell things like cushions actually in smaller if you're starting locally. I think really my market should be looking over to bigger cities and across the water to London, places like that. But at the minute, I'm working part-time alongside childcare responsibilities with my son. So I'm not really in a position at the minute to expand stockists. But so when I started off, stockists tend to be local, and a lot of craft shops wouldn't have much space for cushions, and they tend to be quite expensive as well. So I find that I just needed smaller products, and then I started making like little zipped travel pouches, zipped bags, which were easier for craft shops to hold and less of an investment for them if they were purchasing them. So I started making smaller products like that, but then they had their own challenges because they had a lot of work involved in the sewing, and I would do that all myself on the sewing machine as well. So I really then wanted to try out doing scarves and throws. I really love functional textiles, so it doesn't matter whether it's a cushion that you sit on or a scarf for a throw, or a wrap that you wrap around you, or a blanket. It's really just making the most of what you can do on a loom on it, and making the most of the hand woven process. So yeah, I love doing what I want to do now. Actually weave up some for the winter is the big wide light wraps. They're big, kind of multi-purpose. I like the idea of that people could use them as a wrap and out for an evening, or they could throw it over their sofa, and it would still look nice, or be like a blanket almost as well. So quite like that idea of dual purpose items, and the function itself doesn't really matter. It's more about using the item.
And could you talk about the materials that you're using as well, and where you source them, and the importance of your sourcing?
Yeah, sure. So one of the main aims I wanted to achieve through Olla Nua was to use yarns that were as local as possible. That's not always easy because the textile industry, especially in Ireland, unfortunately, really took a big hit with all the globalisation expansion that happened in lots of different industries, suppose from the 80s onwards, or I'm sure started earlier than that. But so there's very few mills left. That we have quite a rich woolen industry, or heritage, in Ireland, and that's I really love. Was always drawn to wool, so I really love the properties of wool and how it is so warming but also cooling in our climate. It's breathable, but on our quite cool climate, it keeps you cozy. It's insulating. It changes when you wash it, so you can get a different kind of finish depending on how you finish the item. So I love the whole woolen heritage in Ireland, but there's very few mills left, unfortunately, that weave in wool and that spin the yarns. But fortunately, we have a really great local yarn spinner in Donegal, in Kilcar, Donegal Yarns. So I would source quite a lot of my yarns from there, although it's very small quantities really, because I'm only producing everything by hand, so I'm not using huge quantities. But I love the whole history of the Donegal yarn. The authentic Donegal yarn is still spun in Donegal, so it would have the little fleck in the wool, the kind of bright coloured fleck through the different colours of yarn, and that's from the tradition of when it was all way back when it was all hand spun. Dye stuff and brightly coloured wools weren't in great supply. That were quite precious. So the women would use little specks of these bright colours in amongst plainer, maybe browns and whites, and it would sort of cheer up the yarn, so you get this lovely flecked and it kind of works well with the landscape of Donegal as well. So I love their yarns, and now obviously they're spun industrially in their factory. But I got a great wee tour of the factory when I was starting up. Chris Vinegar, the manager there, gave me a tour of the factory, which was lovely, and it was just great. I think they employed, at that stage anyway, they employed about 20 people, and it's a very small place, so it's a good source of employment locally. But it was just lovely to see the process that the yarn went through, and so I purchased a lot of their yarn for my products, and also then sourced some from across the water that would be spun in Yorkshire. But I try to keep it yarns that are spun in the UK and Ireland.
Yeah, brilliant. And your colour palette as well is so beautiful and so delicate, and it's kind of like slightly stronger pastels. You've got light sort of lilacs, and you've got a very soft yellow, a lovely sort of turquoisey teal colour, creams, greys and blacks. Is there a particular reason why you've chosen those colour palettes? And your designs are also very minimal, and they're gorgeous. I mean, where does that inspiration sort of come from?
Well, I suppose with colour, I always find it a bit of a challenge to use colour. So I'm actually trying to change a little bit with a new range of samples that I'm doing for a project now. I got some Arts Council funding recently, and I was able to purchase a new loom which you can sample on, as well as keeping the larger loom set up. So I'm trying to kind of just bring in some different kind of colours, more autumnal, richer colours. So I'm hoping that won't be a bit strange from what I've done before. But I don't know, I was just always drawn to the neutrals, I suppose, initially, and then I would use some softer, slightly brighter colours to add into the mix, because people, maybe if it's for their own home, they would have mainly neutrals, but they like a little bit of colour, so it would be quite restrained colour palette, I suppose. I just find it quite tricky to commit to colour. If you choose a colour, you're committing, really making a statement. I suppose that's why and also with with the natural woolen yarns, obviously in their natural state, they're shades of white and cream and brown and grey, and really I suppose I have quite a sustainable ethos in my business, where I really like things to be as natural as possible, and hopefully that the companies that are producing the yarns don't do anything that's damaging to the environment. So I suppose the less dye that's used, the better it is really for the environment, if the yarn's in its natural state. Yeah, but I do like using a bit of colour. I think everybody likes a little bit of colour in their life. So.
Yeah, they're really gorgeous, gorgeous designs. And have you done, you were saying that you travelled a lot whenever you left university. Have you done any other travelling that has maybe inspired?
Well, I suppose you were asking about inspiration for the design as well, or for the designs as well. Yeah, I've been drawn to quite a few of the Scandinavian countries, I suppose, just because of their design. Their designs appeal to me. So when I was in college, I did a 3-month exchange a 3-month placement through Erasmus.
Amazing.
In Finland, in Helsinki, the art college there. So really spent the time there, I suppose, not doing a lot of weaving actually. Unfortunately, we didn't get to weave with the Finnish students because the language barrier. They did all their learning in Finnish, and obviously it's not an easy language to pick up quickly. So we were taught separately, the foreign students were taught separately. So it didn't really feel like I got a great technical insight there, and actually the project just happened to be, or what we were asked if we wanted to do and we agreed, was an art-based textile project, which actually I realised after didn't really suit my kind of way of working. But anyway, apart from the textiles that I did there, it was more just the whole design ethos and learning about their history. People like Alvar Aalto, the architect and designer, the amazing furniture that he produced, and the whole ethos. They have such a long design heritage there, and it's quite a restrained in a way of thinking about design, and form follows function, I suppose, is the phrase I kept hearing over and over in the museums over there. So that really appealed to me, and I suppose it kind of comes through in the textiles. People would often say to me, oh, it's very Scandinavian. That's not really intentional, but I think I realised there as well, whereas in NCAD, in the National College of Art and Design, the print students there would have done a lot of very detailed floral, very opulent kind of designs, whereas when I went to Finland, the print department there was complete opposite. It was very graphical, very restrained to a few colours, very bold. So I think that kind of came through then my weaving somehow without realising it.
Great. Okay. So you said you recently got some funding from the Arts Council. Could you talk about that a little bit?
So I applied to the Arts Council's SIAP programme, which is Support for the Individual Artist programme, which thankfully designers are allowed to apply for. So thankfully I was successful last year, and I got some funding back last October for a project which I needed a loom for. So it was basically I wanted to be able to do a project where I started designing new samples for what will be products hopefully next year. But the design part of weaving takes so much time, and it's quite an investment in your time that it's quite difficult to do alongside producing of my items for shops that I need to sell to get an income. So it was really good just to have a second loom, and a more modern loom that's a little bit easier to set up, so that I could do that project and have it developing while I'm doing other work on my bigger loom for production. So I actually only got the loom in April. I think they build them especially for you, so it took a lot longer to come than I had realised. So I'm just really getting into the project now, but I'm hoping to get that kind of the initial stage of it wrapped up anyway. So I'll have the initial samples woven up now this month, and I've been working on it, and it's more trying to slightly change the direction in my designs. That a lot of the initial designs that I've wove for Olla Nua have been quite graphical. A lot of woven textiles would obviously be all over textures, whereas mine have quite a definite pattern on them, which is woven in with what I call supplementary warp, which are like warp threads that aren't really integral to the structure of the fabric. So they're more like an embellishment. They almost look like embroidery, but they're woven into the cloth to create like quite a bold pattern. So I'm slightly changing direction, using that same kind of technique, using supplementary warp, but trying to do it more in an all over contextual format, or using inspiration from natural textures rather than sort of particular pattern. So yeah, I've been looking at like just plants and tree bark and things like that, and it's not really about trying to replicate a particular thing from nature or a particular picture that I've taken or anything. It's more about trying to just create a feeling through the texture that I'm creating. So I'm hoping to cut into the floats. So when in weaving you would have sometimes floats where a thread or yarn floats over the surface. So I'm going to cut through those floats and try and create a bit more of a third dimension to the textiles. So.
Amazing. So you've also done previously workshops as well. How do you make something that typically you need a studio space with such a massive loom? How do you make that then possible to bring to create workshops? Yeah,
well, it was something I really wanted to do because I love showing other people the process, and I love showing other people how they could do something themselves and giving them that sense of satisfaction of being able to produce their own textiles. So I was determined to do it in some sense, but obviously I couldn't take my loom away, and it wasn't really suitable to bring people to this space, and also only one person can work on a big loom at a time. There's quite a different type of weaving from I do, but there's type of weaving called tapestry weaving, which is done usually on a frame loom, and you can do it on a really simple, a loom can be as simple or as complicated as you make it. So really, the simpler the loom, the more you're doing in your head and with your hands, but it doesn't need to be a complicated piece of equipment. It's just very slow then, obviously, to weave large pieces, or you're restricted to the size of the piece you can make, but really all you need to begin weaving is like a picture frame, or frame 4 pieces of wood. So that's how I started just doing the tapestry weaving classes, and tapestries are usually kind of heavier pieces that are suitable for hanging on the wall, or you can make like coasters or table mats, things like that. So it's quite a different way of weaving actually, because you're using your hands to dictate the pattern rather than the technical setup of the loom. But it's much simpler to understand then from scratch if you've no experience in weaving. So yeah, I've done a few classes in that through the country. I haven't done so much recently now, since I had my son last year and just got back into work then last October, November time. So I've just taken a step back because there's quite a lot of planning involved in workshops, and I don't like going in without having that kind of planned out and everything. So I've just taken a bit of time now to get back into the design and weaving and the Arts Council project that I'm working on. Right. But yeah, I love teaching.
Yeah. So how do you find that balance? Saying that you've recently become a mother, how do you find that balance as a maker and now having this sort of new role in your life?
Yeah, it can be challenging. It's really good to be able to keep going with the weaving. I have my son in nursery 2 mornings a week, which isn't a lot of time, but then I try to get other days, if my husband's not working a day or whatever, I'll try and get a bit more time through the week as well. But I'm definitely being a bit less productive now than would have been before he was born. Obviously, you have less time, but it's also by choice. I really enjoy being able to spend the time with him, and I suppose that's one of the advantages of being self-employed, because you're able to choose how much time you spend on it as well. Childcare is very expensive, so that's another factor, obviously, especially if you're a maker. And to be honest, you're not necessarily making, or it takes a lot of time to make a kind of a normal wage, so you're maybe making a lot less because you're weighing it up with the freedom that it gives you, or the satisfaction that it gives you, the kind of lifestyle that you're able to lead. So yeah, it's a bit of balance and a bit of a juggling act, to be honest. But I kind of see it as more of a long-term investment. My business more as a long-term investment, where on my time, where maybe taking a bit of a step back for a few years, where I'm producing a bit less and maybe not expanding stockists, but hopefully in the future I'll be able to build it up a little bit more again. So it's just really flexible, and that's the way I look at it. I think, yeah, it's difficult to juggle your time, but also you've got the opportunity to have the best of both worlds.
Yeah, just because I think being a maker and being self-employed, for me anyway, are such it takes so much time and effort and dedication. And we've just moved house, and our neighbours have kids, and it seems like that is such a demanding role as well. Like I have such admiration for people who manage to do both. Like it just seems like such an incredible thing. And both you and Gemma are parents, and I just think it's amazing how you manage to do it.
Yeah, I wouldn't consider it at the minute to be my main thing. Really, to be honest, it has taken a bit of a step back. I might look like I've kept things going just the same, but really, I'm not able to produce the same amount of work as somebody working full time, and you can't do everything.
But no,
you have to be realistic. So you might get the impression that everybody's doing this huge amount of work, but really, from my point of view anyway, what I'm doing is keeping it ticking over. Keeping my foot in it and keeping designing new work, so that I'll have that to come back to eventually and have that source of new designs coming through. But I'm not going to pretend that it's like being really productive at the minute, or
no, but I think that's brilliant because I do think there are so many people who produce this illusion that everything is so successful every single time and everything's going at such a speed.
I'm sure there are people who do that, and I really admire them too. But I think just it is demanding being a parent, and it's time. You just don't have the same amount of time you used to, and even in the evenings. I think at the start I was actually very good when I got back into work after I did take my 9 months maternity leave, and thankfully I was eligible for maternity allowance then, which is really good. So I took that time off, but when I got back I think it was quite good initially at doing work in the evenings. Like I would try to keep my studio time for practical time. I don't have a computer here even, so I would do all my making when I'm in the studio and nothing else really, and try to do everything else, including design work, at home, and emails and everything at home in the evenings. But just sometimes you're just so tired that I find it really difficult to do that now. So I'm not doing it as much as I should do really, but I suppose that's what people who are very productive while they're being a parent are doing, a lot of their work in the evenings after their children go to bed.
I know I try to fit in as much as possible. I really think that the mental health aspect of making, for me anyway, is a massive factor. I stopped making when I knew I was going to have Ben, because I was just so excited about the prospect of having this little tiny person. And so I thought, this it had been something that I wanted for a long time. But then I did keep making in many ways. Maybe I wasn't making ceramics, but I was knitting, or I was drawing, or I was baking too much. But there was always the idea of, I will eventually continue this. And so it was fantastic to have that time where it was sitting back, because I don't think I'd done it often enough, where I sat back and just thought about what I want my business to look like and what I want to do, and then also reassess what I was doing badly before, because I was doing so much badly.
Sometimes you're better doing nothing at all than do it badly.
Oh yeah, definitely. I have that approach now, because I see it as though I'm I'm juggling, and sometimes it may look like I'm juggling and like I've got like 1,000 balls in the air and I'm managing them all. But a lot of the time there's so many that are dropped on the floor.
Yeah.
I'm trying to hide them.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely the reality of trying to, you're trying to make sure everybody's seeing this side of you that, you know, because I think even the idea of it myself is really nice. I like the idea of me being productive, but it's not real.
Also, you want to make the most of time when you have the privilege of having children. It's lovely to. Yeah, we were the same. I mean, we were married 4 years, I think, before Luca was born, so we really looked forward to him coming. And I didn't want to, you know, even if childcare had been free, I probably wouldn't. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but everybody's different. You know, I really wanted to just spend as much time as possible with him when he's small, but also it's great to have something that you can escape to every now and again for a few hours, because it can be quite tiring and monotonous in a way as well. There's a certain routine that has to be followed every day, so yeah, it's nice to have a bit of change every now and again and to do something creative on your own.
Brilliant. So what's the really big plans? You were saying about how with this Arts Council funding that's the next stage of you're making these samples and for new products later on. Is that's the focus then for your practice at the moment, is working towards that?
Yeah.
Do you have any shows that you're in the future maybe?
Well, I think at the minute, just with being such limited hours in the studio and part-time, I'm taking every day each week as it comes. I used to try and do a lot of planning and plan ahead, and you know, I usually at the start of the year take time to start getting into a good routine of writing out a plan for the week ahead or for the month ahead or for 3 months ahead, you know, like you should. That's all very well in theory, but then I usually find when I start getting into things, different things happen, things come along outside of work that you weren't expecting, and you know, there's always things going on outside of work, so it's just, I find it always falls back. And then I get a bit frustrated then when I haven't followed my plan. So sometimes I just give up on plans and take each week as it comes. But I'm lucky to be able to do that, so I don't have to get too stressed out because I've got a very supportive family. My husband's very supportive, and lucky that he has a good job and a good income where he's able to support me through doing this, my own business, as well as looking after our son during the day when he's at work. So plans. Gosh, well, I would really love to do some fairs across the water, just somewhere outside of Ireland to get a bit of a different perspective, but I just haven't managed to get there yet. I think just because the weaving process is so slow, the pieces are quite expensive then to produce time-wise when you cost it out. So it's quite difficult to build up enough stock. I only have 3 stockists at the minute, and they're all in Ireland. But that's enough for me at the minute, because some of the pieces are quite big and time consuming to produce, and I'm not really being as productive even as I would like with those stockists. So I can't really think about doing a fair and having all these extra products to take over to a fair whenever, you know, I need to kind of keep the stockists that I have at the minute stocked up. So yeah, it's something I would love to take part in is the selvage fairs. Selvage is, I don't know if you've heard of it, they're a textile specialist magazine produced in London. I think it's London. So it's a really beautiful magazine. I think it started just when I was in college. It's all about all different aspects of textiles and all over the world. A lovely magazine, and they also have their fairs at Christmas time, usually in Scotland and in London. Next year I think they're having a World Textiles Fair. They got some crowdfunding to do that, so I would love to take part in some of their smaller fairs at some stage, because I think they'd be attended by people who, you know, I really need a customer who not just appreciates craft but appreciates the whole process of the hand woven technique, and is willing to pay. Unfortunately, it's not cheap, and you know, they have to be willing to pay a wee bit more for something that's produced by hand.
So what are you looking for in even a stockist of your work? Do you have any requirements about, I mean, how particular are you about stockists? I mean, obviously with, you know, you've mentioned about the time that you're dedicating to your practice at the moment, and so you're not looking to expand the stockists, but is that something that you consider of who you're stocking? their customer base?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I suppose they really need to be able to communicate something about process behind the hand woven items that I stock them with, because a lot of the time I would do sale or return, which isn't ideal because you're not getting sale or return for anybody listening who's not maybe used to the terms. It's where you're sending goods to a stockist and they're not paying you for them until they sell them, and then they're taking a commission off that. But it works quite well for me because some of the items are quite expensive and maybe the stockist doesn't want to invest in it if they're not sure if it's going to sell, but at the same time I have sold, generally they will sell eventually, so it means a bit less commitment from the stockist, but also I'll get that income and slightly higher rate of commission than would normally through wholesale, and also it means I can supply them with small quantities as I have them, rather than them placing large orders, which I might not be able to fulfill. So they need to be able to communicate a bit of the process about the hand woven product, because it is quite different than there would be mills in Donegal that would produce beautiful textiles, but they would be much cheaper because they're produced really on a much larger scale in a factory, and there's a whole different maybe design background to it, or maybe they're plainer fabrics that are repeated and produced in large multiples rather than very small batches, so they need to have a bit of an understanding.
Yeah. Okay. So do you prefer selling direct, whether it be your website or at a craft fair, compared to maybe stocking?
I do enjoy selling directly because I enjoy the interaction with the person who's going to maybe use the product or give it to somebody. But at the same time, because they do work out quite expensive, especially the larger pieces, a fair or markets, local markets anyway, are not really the best place. It's hard to get the right kind of customer coming along to those, or they may be expecting the items to be much cheaper. And then it's also a bit of a challenge to sell directly, as a lot of makers will know, probably yourselves. It's difficult to sell at fairs as well as stock retailers, because you're trying to keep, you don't want to undercut your stockists, so you have to keep the prices closer the same as what you would retail for through shops, but then it might come across as being quite expensive to people who go to markets. So I find markets I don't really tend to do many local markets, although I do enjoy selling directly. But so I think because the hand weaving is such a demanding process to it, and so time consuming, and you're doing all the other things like the admin and everything as well. I like other people to be able to take on the selling bit. So I don't have a web shop, and that's very intentional, though I may well do in the future. That might be something I should look at, because people do ask me about buying off me directly. But I really appreciate the amount of time that it actually takes to sell work and to promote the work. And there is a lot of work involved. Sometimes you find makers complaining a bit about how much a shop will take off the price of the item that's being sold and that kind of thing. But I really think I'm quite happy that they will take that, because if they're willing to put the time into setting up shop and the risk that's involved in that, and the kind of commitment that involves, and the staff they have to employ, I'm quite happy for them to take that cut if they can find the customer.
Definitely.
And so what has been to date, what has been the best selling opportunity for you, do you think?
Well, to do with direct selling, I would say we would have surprised actually our local market here that we would have usually at Christmas, at the Little American Congress in Oakfield Avenue. We have a small Christmas market. We don't have a huge space, but Orla and Martin have organised it the past 3 Christmases or so. And I was quite surprised. I think, I'm never going to sell anything because it's too expensive. Nobody's going to want to buy these things at this price here. But actually, the kind of customers, I think it might be because Orla and Martin are architects and they have the particular kind of clientele that would follow them, so they attract actually people who really appreciate design and craft. So it always surprises me when they do sell pieces at it. It's always a nice surprise, Christmas.
Brilliant. I'm sure it's well received as well, like just having that extra money in time for Christmas. And I was also wanting to ask something I should have asked earlier, but how you're talking about it's it's a very labour intensive process, and definitely seeing the looms and knowing that you can't change a design halfway through, that you have to keep it continuously going. I mean, to make a product or a run of textiles, would you make for cushions, for example, would you make each individual sort of square for the front, or would you make a whole run of items, and how long does that process generally take, including like the setup and everything?
Okay. Quite a lot to cover there. Well, there is a bit of flexibility in the design in that you can change the pattern as you're weaving to an extent, but it's dictated by the setup of the threading. So you can change how the weft is woven through to an extent, but you can't completely change the setup mid-weave unless you're rethreading the whole loom, which is very time consuming. So yeah, you're right, you can't change it completely, but you can change it a little bit. So if something's not quite working out, there's a little bit of flexibility to change the weaving pattern through the weft that's being thrown. But it depends really on the product. With the likes of the Newgrange cushion, which is like a design in itself, it's like a centralized diamond pattern surrounded by zigzags. So it's it's not really a continuous length of fabric that you can just cut into anywhere along it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So yeah, those took quite a lot of planning, because you have to work out each cushion cover has to be woven individually, although it will be woven in a big long run. I could weave how many ever I wanted to at the one in one length and then cut it up, but yeah, it would have to be woven in blocks according to the cushion cover. And then after the fabric is after the cloth is woven, it's not really finished. With weaving and wool yarns, the woolen yarns are spun in the factory in oils. I think they wash the yarns first to get rid of the dirt and everything, and then they add in maybe synthetic or other types of oils in the spinning process to help the spinning process. So those need to be washed out then. So the cloth isn't really finished at all when you take it off the loom. It's still quite coarse and quite open looking. So then that's one of the things I really like about the wool, though, is once you wash it, then it really softens up and changes, and you can felt it a little bit by hand, by rubbing, and that kind of thing. So yeah, you have to work out then how much it's going to shrink by and do it. That's why it involves a lot of commitment and time in designing a new cloth, because you have to do a lot of trial and error testing and washing and testing the size it's going to end up as. So it can be quite tricky if you're weaving something like the Newgrange cushion, but there are fabrics you can weave obviously that are continuous and the pattern won't change throughout. It will just be continuous pattern, and that's obviously a little bit more straightforward then. So the new ones I'm doing, I'm hoping to make things a little bit easier for myself.
Yeah. Just to also touch on that slightly, does it matter, does the dye that's used to colour the threads and so on, does that affect the shrinkage rate at all, or the flexibility in the yarn?
The colour itself?
The dyes that they use to make the colours. Do you find some colours work differently at all? No,
I haven't actually ever thought about that, but no, I haven't noticed. No, really what would change how the fabric will finish and end up is the type of yarn and the type of wool. So there's a huge variety in sheep's wool depending on the breed and and maybe the age of the sheep, I suppose, as well, because you have lamb's wool is from younger sheep and it's obviously a lot softer, and then you have different breeds which would be softer than others. So for like a really fine lamb's wool would shrink a lot more and be a lot softer when you would finish it, compared to something like more like what you call like a Shetland yarn that would usually use coarser wools. So yeah, it's really more about the qualities of the yarn that you're using rather than the colour or the dyes.
And is it predominantly sheep? I mean, can you get like I know there's mohair as well.
Mohair, yeah, I don't know.
But is that wool? That's not really considered wool, is it?
Technically, I'm not sure.
I don't know. I don't
think
know.
so. Well, yeah, technically, I think wool is usually sheep, isn't it? Yeah. But no, I think there's lots of different animal fibers.
Yeah.
Like alpaca and mohair, as you said, which I'm not sure.
I think it's that goat.
Yeah, it is goat, isn't it?
I think it is, but I'm not too sure.
Goat. Wool is really what I focus on. Alpaca is beautiful, and actually there are some local producers, I think.
Wow.
It's very, very soft, and actually I've just shrunk. Literally yesterday I just shrunk a jumper that I bought in Bolivia, hand knitted alpaca jumper that I bought from my husband back in 2006, and I don't think he ever wore, but I just decided this needed to be washed and put away, and of course I spun it in the washing machine, which I would often do with my fabrics, which is fine for most wools, to spin the water out. I hand washed it and then spun it to get the water out, and it completely shrank into a child-sized jumper. So,
I suppose
so different fibres are,
there's you can put that to use now though.
It's a bit like cardboard, but so different animal fibres actually have very different qualities, and plant fibres as well, obviously. So it's just I suppose it's easier to stick with the one type.
Is there any way, if that does happen, is there any way it can be?
No. Unfortunately not.
Well,
if anybody has found a way, you can let me know. But I think once a fibre like that has been changed, so I suppose it's not really chemical, but it's more the physical properties of the fibre. I think with wool anyway, it's like little scales on the fibre that overlap, and when it's exposed to water and soap and heat and friction, they interlock, and that's what felting is. And with fabrics, woven fabrics, you can use that a wee bit to felt the surface of the fabric if you want, to make it like kind of more a felted texture. So as far as I know, it's irreversible.
Okay, great. Right, so usually towards the end of our conversations, we like to ask some kind of quick questions, whether it's to do with your practice or not. But you have travelled a lot as well. Where do you recommend to go?
Well, I haven't travelled as much as we'd like to in the last few years, but somewhere we really want to get back to, and myself and my husband have been through, 2 or 3 twice already, Stockholm in Sweden, I'd say. It's a beautiful city. We've also been to Copenhagen, and obviously I've been to Helsinki, which are also really lovely. But I think with Stockholm, it was just the fact that you've got a city with all the design museums, so many museums on your doorstep, but then as well as that, it's like a step off point for thousands of, I think hundreds and hundreds of islands in the archipelago. So you can just hop on a boat one day and visit an island, or do a wee camping trip for a few days. So it's really gorgeous, and there's an old part of the city that's really lovely, and food is amazing, very expensive, which is why we haven't been back there since we got engaged there actually. But I definitely would recommend it if you can save up for a long weekend or.
And so what time of year then have you been? Or?
We were in the summer there actually, but I'd love to go back in the winter because I think it'd be so different. Obviously they get quite cold weather over there, and I'd be interested to see if like Helsinki, when I was there in Helsinki on my Erasmus exchange, it was over the winter period from January to March, and the sea was frozen, which I just found amazing. I couldn't believe it, to see people
you wouldn't say
walking
that here.
on the sea, so you could walk out to some of the islands,
which
was amazing, and you could skate on the lakes and everything. So I would love to go back to Stockholm and see what it's like in the winter, but in the summer it's gorgeous. It's very lush, can be quite warm, and they have a lot of parkland, and the city's very green. A lot of people cycle obviously over there, which is something beautiful. I just love to see, that there's less emphasis on cars and that kind of thing. So it's just it's a really lovely green city.
Brilliant. Okay, so then what is the last piece of music that you listen to?
Well, I used to listen to lots of albums and go to lots of gigs, but in the past few years I just haven't managed to find that time. But actually recently we've just moved to North Belfast, close to the studio here, and there's a really lovely art centre, the Duncairn Art Centre, which maybe you know, just down the road from here. And they have 50s nights every now and again, or every month roughly, where I think in theory it's called 50s because they're supposed to have 50 guests, but it usually ends up being a few more. Wow. And they have a different theme every month, and different artists playing music and speaking. And the recent one I was at, actually Robin you'll be familiar with, was Ger Wolfe. Yes. The guy from Cork, singer-songwriter, and I'd never heard of him before, and it was just a lovely surprise to hear something at the end of the concert where really beautiful, relaxing music, and I love the way his accent came through in his singing. So I bought one of his albums there, so I suppose that's what I've been listening to recently. So really enjoyed him. And then I would listen to a lot of podcasts as well when I'm working, or just from the radio, generally from BBC, like Mark Radcliffe's Folk Hour, or Keris Matthews and Six Music. Her wee session on a Sunday is really good. So,
brilliant. Very nice.
Amazing. And then so I suppose possibly the final question, well, we've got another question on this, but what was the last piece of locally made or designed artwork or craft have you bought?
Unfortunately I don't get to buy. I haven't bought much for myself. I always feel like I have to give things away when I buy them. So I think the last item I bought maybe was a ring from Claire Skelton as a gift for a relative last Christmas. I love her work. It's very delicate, just so pretty and delicate. Very minimal, so it's something, if anybody's listening, I would love myself.
Content. That's very nice.
Great. And so then where can people get in contact with you or sort of find your work and website and all that?
Well, my website, where you can find everything through, is www.ollanua.com. So that's OLLANUA.com, and you can find a wee contact page there. You're welcome. Which will go through to drop me a line. That'll go through to my email. And I'm on Instagram. Not really Facebook so much, to be honest, these days. So mainly Instagram. You can drop me a message if you have any inquiries. But also really encourage people to get in touch with my stockists. So I have a wait list of my stockists on my website. And I would really encourage you, if you want to purchase any work or have a look at any work, give them a shout and they'll be very helpful.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. It's been really fantastic making conversation with you. And it's been very insightful as well. So thank you.
Well, thanks for visiting.
Thanks.
It was so lovely to talk to Nicola in her studio in North Belfast, especially to see the setup that she has. I think textiles is one of those types of craft where you don't quite understand the amount of technical planning that goes into it and how intricate it can be. So it was beautiful to see her pristine setup and just so impressive how professional her designs and branding and how cohesive everything is. So thank you so much for spending time with us, Nicola, and letting us into your little making world. So next Thursday is our final episode, and I'm so excited that we get to share with you our podcast with Fiona Shannon, who is an amazing ceramicist based in Portstewart in Floorfields Art Centre. So yes, tune in next Thursday for our final podcast of the Maker series for 2019.